The cruelty is the point. The chaos is the tool. The Constitution is just scenery. At approximately 4:15 in the morning, 3 unmarked white buses pulled out from Bluebonnet Detention Center in Anson, Texas. Inside were 29 men, most of them from Venezuela, a few from Nicaragua and Cuba. None of them had criminal records. None had been convicted in immigration court. Several had pending asylum claims. A few had legal representatives, but they were not notified. The buses were headed for a remote airstrip near Fort Worth. On board, the men were quiet, some praying, others resigned. They thought it was a transfer. A few whispered they were being deported, but it didn't make sense. They hadn't been given final orders, the cases were ongoing, and yet the buses rolled on. At 6:02 in the morning, 90 minutes later, the convoy turned around. It had just missed the airport exit. The changing course was not due to weather or logistics. It was because, at that very moment, legal filings from the ACLU and several immigration attorneys were being reviewed by the U.S. Supreme Court. A temporary injunction was issued, blocking the deportation. Had it come an hour later, those 29 men would have been flown out of the country, removed without a hearing, stripped of their right to due process. A right the Constitution guarantees to all persons, not just citizens. And yet the buses turning around was seen as a miracle. That should terrify us. What enabled this attempt was the Trump administration's revival of a forgotten statute, the Alien Enemies Act, originally passed in 1798 during a period of intense fear that foreign agents might infiltrate America during wartime. The law is simple but powerful. It grants the president authority to apprehend, restrain, secure, and remove nationals of any hostile foreign nation during declared war or invasion. It was last widely used during World War II to justify the internment of Japanese, German, and Italian nationals. Notably, it was never intended for use against refugees or asylum seekers, nor has it been used in peacetime against individuals fleeing persecution. Yet in 2024, under Trump's directive, ICE began issuing removal orders citing the Alien Enemies Act to Venezuelan and Cuban nationals, despite neither country being at war with the United States and despite diplomatic relations, however strained, still existing. Legal experts were baffled. Constitutional scholars sounded alarms. Civil liberties organizations filed lawsuits. But the strategy wasn't designed to hold up in court. It was designed to move faster than the courts could respond. The Trump-era immigration philosophy is rooted not in legality, but optics and speed. Stephen Miller, the former senior advisor who architected most of Trump's immigration agenda, once famously said in an internal memo, "The law is slow, fear is fast, we move on fear." And that's exactly what they did. By labeling migrants from hostile nations as security threats, even without any evidence of wrongdoing, Trump's DHS was able to bypass typical removal proceedings. In internal ICE documents leaked to ProPublica, agents were instructed to avoid informing detainees of their pending deportation, execute removals within 24 to 48 hours of internal processing, sidestep immigration courts by citing national security clauses. In short, it was an attempt to erase people from the country without letting anyone notice, a tactic borrowed more from authoritarian regimes than liberal democracies. Even if we ignore the constitutional violations, the entire strategy is logistically absurd. Consider the non-detained immigration court docket now exceeds 14.2 million people. The US has roughly 34,000 ICE detention beds, often already full. Deportations average between 10,000 and 12,000 per month, even under aggressive policies. If the Trump administration's goal is to deport 14 million people, even at maximum efficiency, it would take over 1,100 years to accomplish, and that's without considering due process, appeals, TPS, or international cooperation. More than 250,000 Venezuelans in the US have TPS, temporary protected status. Another 600,000 are in asylum proceedings. And Venezuela doesn't accept deportation flights from the US anyway. Cuba, likewise, has suspended many deportation returns due to strained relations. That means ICE can detain migrants, but often cannot legally or diplomatically return them anywhere. So why detain them at all? Because it sends a message, it fosters fear. It destabilizes communities. It rallies the base. It's not about immigration policy. It's about performance politics. An ICE caseworker in Louisiana, speaking anonymously, said, "We know some of these people are safe and eligible for protection, but we get pressure from higher up to push them through fast. It's not about the individual, it's about hitting numbers." Another whistleblower in South Texas described watching colleagues tear up legal documentation submitted by families outside detention centers. They call it a joke. They call these people inventory. That's what we've become, warehousing humans. Behind every stat lies a name, a father trying to reunite with his child, a mother who walked across 5 countries to escape gang rape, a trans woman fleeing torture in state prisons. These are not criminals, they are survivors. But under Trump's doctrine, their humanity is inconvenient. Legal resistance has grown, but it's overwhelmed. The ACLU, Texas Civil Rights Project, Human Rights First, and hundreds of immigration attorneys are fighting to slow the machinery, but it's like trying to stop a freight train with your hands. Judges are often unable to act before removals occur. ICE can shuffle detainees between facilities in different states within hours, making it difficult for lawyers to even locate their clients. In one case, a man from Cuba was deported 2 hours before a federal judge signed an emergency stay. By the time courts intervene, damage has already been inflicted. Lives uprooted, trauma embedded, families scattered, trust destroyed. And that, again, is the point. Trump's use of the Alien Enemies Act signals something deeper. A slow-motion abandonment of constitutional law when it becomes inconvenient. He doesn't need to change the law, just ignore it. He doesn't need to win in court, just outpace it. Today it's asylum seekers. Tomorrow will it be dissidents, protesters, journalists? The scaffolding is already built. We must stop pretending this is a normal policy dispute. This is about authoritarian tactics being normalized under the guise of immigration enforcement. And if we wait for panic to set in, it will already be too late. To prevent this dystopian slide from becoming permanent, we must act on multiple fronts. Repeal or update the Alien Enemies Act. No president should wield 18th century wartime powers in peacetime. Fully fund and modernize immigration courts, including increasing judge capacity and digital systems for accountability. Create legal and diplomatic pathways for countries like Venezuela and Cuba to accept returns only in specific justified cases, not as blanket expulsions. Implement oversight mechanisms for ICE and DHS, including whistleblower protections, public reporting, and legal notification requirements. Educate the public. Many Americans don't know these tactics are happening. That ignorance is what fuels their continuation. When those buses turned around near Fort Worth, it wasn't a triumph of justice, it was an accident of timing. In a functioning democracy, people shouldn't rely on split-second court rulings or back-channel legal heroics to avoid illegal deportation. They should be protected by the rule of law, not crushed by the speed of executive will. The next time the court might be too late, the lawyers might miss the window, the buses might make it to the tarmac. That's why we must act before panic shows up, because by then democracy will already be bleeding. Thanks for watching.